Hello music colleagues, my name is Patrick Collins, and I'm a music technology instructor in Sugar Hill, Georgia. I'm excited to join the CMA Foundation's United Voices for Music Education initiative. We know that last year left us with a gap in instruction and quality time spent with our students face-to-face. I'm here to share a lesson plan on creating music with found sounds to help give you some thought starters as you get back in the classroom. This lesson is geared towards beginning students at the end of their year or intermediate and advanced students. This lesson can also be completed with a variety level of technology access, so remote learning is very much possible with this lesson plan. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So again, the lesson here is creating music with found sounds. The objective is that students are going to be able to record and compile their own sample packs and then use those samples to create an original piece of music. The NAFME standards are here for you to reference. Discussion posts are a great way to get a lot of those connecting with and responding to standards in as they discuss their projects and kind of picking what sounds they have picked to make their project with. As for materials, all that you and your students need are internet connected devices, a microphone, which can be their cell phone, a digital audio workstation. There are a couple free cloud-based ones, which we'll talk more about later, a Google form to collect their submissions, and then again, a discussion board platform is great for being able to let the students connect with each other and respond to everything that's going on with the project. So as an example of a finished project, here is Andrew Wong. He has a couple of these across a couple different years where he takes sounds and then does covers of hit songs. So just to play a little bit for you of this. So again, his videos will be a great resource to get the students kind of engaged and get them started and thinking about what this project might look like for them. So again, in this project, what we're talking about is sampling, and there's a couple different definitions of sampling. Berkeley Online has a great video that talks about kind of all the different kinds, and it's a great video to get them started, especially keeping clear what is the sampling that we're talking about versus what the sampling is that they may be more familiar with, which is in rap and hip hop music of pulling from other songs. So as a little sidestep from this lesson, if you're looking for any more resources, particularly for music technology, music production, music business, I really recommend you check out this Berkeley Online YouTube channel. It's full of tons of stuff, and there's lots of great copyright videos. So again, if you're looking for more stuff, they have some fantastic lessons and resources over there. So after getting the students going, what you want to do is introduce them to this process of recording samples. And again, Andrew Wong has another great video where he kind of goes through this process. The beginning of the video is him going around buying the items, standard YouTube fare, but the end of it is him kind of going through listening and recording all the different sounds, and I'm going to skip to that. So again, just a really cool video that kind of walks through the process in a general fun way and not too much information to overload the students. If you're looking for an extension video kind of to extend off of the last one, Spitfire Audio, who is a virtual instrument creator, they're a company that creates virtual instruments and sets up a lot of the best sample libraries that are available, has this video where they go through kind of a day in the life of an audio engineer that is recording samples, and they have this piano type instrument here that they go through and record, and this is really a deep dive into a lot of the technical aspects of the process, but also a lot of the creative aspects too. So again, if you have students that maybe are wanting a little bit more, or you're wanting something that can connect to a career based approach, this is a fantastic video to do that. So again, just a little bit of that, but enough that you can kind of see that it really digs into a lot of the technical aspects. So if you're doing this with maybe your advanced or end of your intermediate students, this might be a great video to use as a reference. So once you've kind of introduced them to the project as a whole, what you want to do is make sure that they understand how to record before they start recording. So what they can use to record kind of depends on where they're at. If they're at school and you have microphones, you can have them do that. But if they are at home, you might just want to have them use their phones. Quite honestly, it works pretty well as long as the students follow good microphone recording techniques. So things to remind them: place the microphone as close to the sound source as possible. What we want to do is create the focus on the sound source, right? So we want to just make sure that we're staying as close as possible so that we're not so far away that we get this reverb and lots of room sound, but also not so close that we're starting to clip and distort the sound, right? We want a nice, comfortable distance, but as close as possible. Just helps keep the students, they tend to want to be a little bit further away than what we want. So just keep reminding them that. Second, make sure they are in as quiet of a place as possible when they record, especially those that might be at home. Remind them that if somebody's cooking dinner, it might not be the best time to record, especially right next to them, unless that's the sound they're trying to pick up. Or just make sure they're not in a room that people are going to be coming in and out of, because that can mess up their recording if a door slams in the middle of their recording. Again, start the recording and then wait before the sound starts. That's to make sure that you pick up just the beginning and you pick up the whole beginning. You don't want a student to start it right after they started the sound and then you lose the beginning, the transient of the sound. For that same reason, let it wait for a bit at the end. I tell my students, typically, once you no longer hear the sound, wait 1 or 2 more seconds. And then generally that gives enough to get the complete sound. This is especially important if they're doing sounds that like to ring, so like metal and glass, where their sounds kind of resonate a little bit more. And then listen to your recording before you submit it, right? We want to make sure that they're submitting stuff that sounds the way they meant, or that the mic was on if it was not using their phone where it may be off. So again, just making sure they check it. And one way they can do this is if they can figure out a way to put it on an endless loop. If it sounds pretty natural, looping endlessly, then it's going to probably be a pretty solid sample. If it sounds like it's jumping around, then they may have missed the beginning or end of the sample. As for what they can use to record, I mentioned phones. The apps that I found work best are just the Voice Notes app. If they're an Android phone, they might have to download a Voice Notes app. A lot of them don't come with one pre-installed. Google Keep is an option as well for something to record, and it'll already put it on the cloud for them. But what I found worked really well was having them just use Snapchat. With Snapchat, they can record a quick 10-second segment, or however long they want it to be, and then just press the download button, and then it puts it on their phone. What was cool about this is that, one, it gives you the video. So if you had a student that maybe is in the AV program and they wanted to put together a video like David Wong's, then they can do that. They have the video as a resource there for them. The other thing is I found that a lot of my students actually put it on their Snapchat stories. They would tell me, or their friends would tell me or show me, and it would just be like these stories of just random sounds around their house, but they would label it and say music tech project or stuff like that, which is a good way to, again, take the project outside of the classroom, right? We want to try to make it as real as possible. If they're sharing that, that means, one, they're probably enjoying it, and two, others are seeing what is happening in your classroom, which we all know is fantastic for your program. So again, Snapchat, a great option for that. And a lot of them probably have it installed on their phone already. So just to show you what my submission form looks like, I have them submit through a Google form once they are done recording. And here is the basic layout. So I have a short description here at the top that just tells them, make sure that they label their file. Don't just leave it as Snapchat recording number 1. Give it something that helps us find what's going on in the recording. So I tell them to label it as material, and then a hyphen, and then item. And then I kind of explain what I mean by both of those. So by material, I mean quite literally, what is the sound, the thing that's making the sound made of? Is it metal? Is it wood? Is it glass? Is it plastic? I'm not looking for necessarily them to be perfectly accurate. The better their description, the easier it is to find sounds you want, but just to give them ideas. And then of course the item, what is the sound? Is it a basketball going through the hoop? Is it the pull chain on a fan? What is it, and what does that look like? Then I just have a standard question on a Google form, and it's a file upload. I do set specific types. I allow video since I am encouraging them to use Snapchat so that we have the video, but I also want to include audio. I do this because I don't want kids uploading just a random document and saying, that's the sound, and then it causing issues, right? These two, I can guarantee that it's probably the sound. It could be a blank file, but it's gonna be a sound more than likely. I go ahead and set the maximum number of files to 10. That's the most Google will let you do, but that just lets them, if they've done a bunch of recordings, they can kind of do it all in one go. And then I set the maximum file size to 10 megabytes. For most of their recordings, they're gonna be like 1 to 10 seconds long. This should be plenty for that. If you're encouraging videos and maybe a little bit longer ones are popping up, you might go up to 100 megs. I would probably avoid 1. That seems a little bit small for me. And then for the settings, for the whole form, I do collect email responses. And that's because I want them to be able to say, yes, please send me a response back when the form is collected. Again, that's just a double check that if I ever say, hey, you didn't turn that in, they can say, I have the email that did. And they can just, it's a double check for me. I also restrict it to our organization, right? So our school system has a G Suite account. This allows me to, one, force the students to go through a more controlled platform, which is just a little bit more COPA and FERPA compliant. But also, Google will add their name to their file. So if you noticed over here, I didn't have them put their name on their file. Again, because I'm going through restricting it to the organization, it'll actually tag their name, and I'll show you that in a second. And then this last box is saying how many files or how much space are you going to allocate on your Google Drive to these uploads. Since I'm on a school G Suite account, we have unlimited storage. If you are using a personal account for some reason, you might want to limit this to 10 or 1. All that does is once you hit that number, it'll stop accepting submissions. So again, I would try to make sure that that number is as big as you can allow it to be so that students don't get locked out. So that's the setup of the form, and then obviously I send it to them. And this is what they see, super basic file upload, and this is where they can get a copy sent to their email once they're done. And then on your end, it's just a folder in Google Drive, right? So here's my samples, and here is a sample. I can double click on it and listen to it. It'll drop them all in here, and you can see where it's tagged my name in at the end because I uploaded through my account. From here, what I do is I just share this folder with the students. So I click the little arrow and do get shareable link. And then I just make sure that this is set to my district so that only people inside can see it. If you weren't part of a district account, you could do anyone with the link and you could share it that way. I would just be careful about doing it that way if you're including student names in the file name. So just be aware of that just for that COPA and FERPA compliance. So that's the basic of how to get students to record and get them to upload their projects. After the students are done recording, what you're going to want to do is make sure they understand timbres, because if they're going to be picking sounds to emulate different instruments, they need to understand what those instruments sound like in their original form. So for this, I really love Ableton's Learning Music website because it gives the basics of each sound, and it's in a pretty straightforward layout. So it's written very concisely, it gives them a picture so they can see exactly what that instrument is, and it also gives a basic sound for them to listen to. Right, so I have the kick drum here. They can hear what does it sound like in electronic and acoustic. And we can actually have discussions on, well, what do you notice that's the same? So what does that make a defining feature of the kick drum? Same thing here, clap and snare. What are kind of defining features that we hear that connect the two? What are different? And again, same thing with hi-hats. And then they can hear all the electronic and all the acoustic together. So again, it's just one of those things that helps kind of draw their thinking in, and it's a point where we can have discussion and think really critically about, well, what are the sounds that we're trying to emulate? So how can I best pick the sounds that make the most sense for that goal? So once we've had the students record their sounds and we've talked about timbres, what we can do is start working on the project. What I like to do is have a discussion post where the students go through our sample pack and find sounds that they like that match the different instruments. For the sake of this lesson, for this video, we're going to stick solely on drums. So I might have them find 1 or 2 sounds that they really like for a kick drum and then have them explain why they think they would be a good fit for that. I also ask them how might they manipulate them to make them sound more like it. So if they have a sound that might make a good kick drum, but it sounds a little bit too high for them, having them articulate that, well, it sounds high, so if I find a way to bring down the pitch, then that can make a better sounding kick drum. So again, I just have them find 2 or so sounds for the kick, snare, and hi-hat, and then I just have them find 2 or 3 additional sounds that they think would work really well with a drum kit. and then have them do those in a discussion post. A side benefit of doing that is that if the students ever forget what sounds they were planning on using, they have a written documentation of what they were going to use. Also, it helps some students that maybe are having trouble finding sounds that work really well. They have a resource of other people that have gone through and sorted through the sounds and found stuff that they really liked. So again, I really like discussion posts for that format. From there, they're going to import those sounds into their digital audio workstation, whatever that may be. In my classroom, we have access to GarageBand and Logic, but with digital learning, our district actually purchased us licenses for Soundtrap. So those are kind of the three that we use, so that's what I know. If you're in a situation where, again, you're virtual and students are at home, Soundtrap and BandLab are probably your best bets because they have cloud-based versions, so think like Google Docs. Anybody from any device can use them. If you have a little bit more flexibility or in your room, you might have to check for your computer. On Windows machines, ones that I really like are Reaper and Studio One are two new good ones. If you have the means to get Ableton, that's fantastic for this kind of project. But again, it just depends on what devices you have. So Soundtrap itself does not have a sampler, which can make the process a little bit different, not more difficult, just different. GarageBand, you have the AU sampler, and Logic Pro X, you have the AU sampler in addition to the EXS24, Ultrabeat, and Alchemy. Learning how to use these exact tools are a little bit outside the scope of this lesson in video, but these are well documented, especially the three for Logic Pro X are well documented on YouTube, so I would just type in one of those tools and how to use, and you'll probably find quite a few videos that are a great resource. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to jump over to Soundtrap, and we're going to start editing our samples. So now that we have our sounds picked out, what we're going to do is get them moved into our DAW. So we're in Soundtrap here. And then we got to get the sounds trimmed up so that we can use them as musical instruments. So here I have a sound. It's actually the sound of a hand slapping against a belly. And it kind of makes a cool snare sound, kind of has that effect. So this is what I'm going to use. I'm going to trim it up. So if you noticed, I had silence at the beginning, I have my sound, and then I have silence at the end. So I need to trim this so that I only have this sound. I'm going to turn off snap to grid. Otherwise, I'm going to have trouble adjusting and getting precise. So I'm going to turn off snap to grid. It may be in a different spot depending on your software. I would just Google the name of your DAW and then turn off snap to grid. And then I'm going to trim it. This is going to typically be in the bottom left corner of the clip. I'm going to get pretty close. I'm going to go ahead and do the back two and get relatively close. And I'm going to zoom in to do the final touches. So I have silence here, and then I start to see the waveform. I'm going to put there. And then the same thing over here. I'm going to go until I start to see the waveform. And then I'm going to see how that sounds at the beginning and end. So it sounds pretty good at the beginning. The end sounds a little bit clipped to me, so I'm going to add just a little bit more to make sure it sounds a little bit smoother. That sounds a little bit better to me. So I have my sound trimmed down. Super simple, not too complicated. If you have a more complex sound, like maybe it's hitting a ball multiple times in a row, you'll have to pick which sound you like, but the same process. Now I'm going to turn snap to grid back on. And this is because I don't have a sampler here, so I need to get this clip back on the musical grid, back in time. And I'm going to set it to quarter note so that it's going to lock to the closest beat. And then now I'm good to go. So this is the start of beat 4. Once you've done that, you can use and adjust your grid size to place whatever kind of rhythm you want. So if I wanted straight eighth notes, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it a couple times. I can now, let me make sure, yep, zoom in a little bit more just to make sure. So these should be eighth notes. If I wanted to do 16th notes, right? Basic idea, straightforward. Drag these over. And I can start building my music this way. So what I've done is I've already gone ahead and trimmed 2 other different samples to emulate a hi-hat and a kick drum. And here's kind of what we end up with. Right, so we have this basic drum groove going with our samples and everything set up. From this point, you could leave it there, or if you wanted to extend it, you could talk about different effects that you can add. So let's say that I think this, maybe I don't feel like this kick drum is low enough. So maybe I start talking about adjusting pitch. Soundtrap will process it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just delete all these. Take this one and then copy and paste it a bunch. Now I have. And then now let's see what that sounds like. So a great moment to talk about maybe adjusting pitch, adding effects, whatever it may be that you want to add to your project. Another thing that this can be a good time to talk about is transients, depending on the scope of your lesson. So remember, the transient is the peak at the beginning of the waveform, and that's what helps us feel in time. That's the sound that we react to. So if I wanted to make this feel a lot more in time, I could trim the beginning of this off a little bit more. So I get the beginning of that transient, and then I'm gonna turn snap to grid back on, and then adjust that. And this should feel just a little bit more in time, but at the expense of it will sound a little bit more electronic as well, since it's more precise. Just these. And then I'll play these two back to back for you. Very subtle difference. It'd probably be a lot easier if it wasn't 16th notes, but hopefully that gives you the idea going forward. So what I do want to show you as one last thing is a project kind of in its complete form. This was done in Logic with the samples that my students uploaded last year. So here we are in Logic Pro X, and here is one of the projects that was created last year. And just to give you a little bit of an orientation, we have that chain pull sound again as a hi-hat. We have that belly slap sound again as a snare drum. And it's actually layered in with also hitting a metal cabinet. We have that tennis ball racket sound as the kick drum. We have a microwave running as our chords. And it has a MIDI effect on it. Give it a little bit of rhythm. And then we have a student actually sampled them playing one note on their ocarina. So we have that used as a full instrument from that one note. So putting that all together, here's what we got. Enjoy. So I hope you can kind of see the flexibility that comes from this project at a variety of different skill levels. You could have beginning students recording samples to learn about recording and starting that process. You could have intermediate students working on starting to put those samples together into a full song. And you could have advanced students really taking those songs and really enhancing them with different effects, MIDI effects and audio effects, whatever that may be. So hopefully you can kind of see the flexibility that this lesson allows. As a whole, my approach to this lesson was to create something that I could use with all of my students regardless of their situation. For my class, I have essentially two different skill levels. I have a beginning, an intermediate, and now an advanced this year of music technology students. And then I also had students that had plenty of access at home to technology, limitless, if you will. And then I had students with limited level of technology access, either just not having enough devices, sharing with multiple siblings, or not having the ability to be on the internet the whole time due to data restrictions. And what I found from this project is it gave the flexibility for all students to learn about sampling together without limiting them or without forcing them into an uncomfortable position. So what ended up happening frequently was my beginning students would be the ones recording samples and learning about recording and the recording process, and my advanced students would be the ones that were more looking into creating the music with those samples that the beginning students created. Of course, there were exceptions of students that maybe had more or less technology access, so I had some beginning students that recorded samples and created music with them, and I had some advanced students that only recorded samples just because of technology access. But again, it was just a community project. That's what I really liked about it, quite honestly, was that I found all of my students, regardless of class, regardless of grade level, were able to work together on a single project. The students that were working on creating music would post a discussion board with their song, kind of work in progress, and they would say, hey, I really wish I had this kind of sound. And a student would come in and respond after they recorded something that they thought would work really well. So it was, again, this really cool collaborative environment. And again, it was a creative solution. The whole thing that we have to deal with right now with digital learning and this whole process is being creative. And that's what we do best in the music world. So do that. There's not going to be any solution that's one size fits all. There's not going to be a solution that makes everyone happy, but we can come up with creative solutions that give every student the best possible experience for them based on their situation. And that's what I hope you got out of this and are able to kind of think through your lessons that you may be trying to come up with or design, or ones that you've used before, or maybe coming up with stuff that you've never used before, is that try to create it in a way that you can help create community to help build that social emotional learning aspect, but also, again, just keeping your kids connected and reducing your workload a little bit by not having to over design for both in-person or digital or high access, low access, or any of those kinds of things, but so that you can really get to all the students and give them the best possible experience during this time of uncertainty. So with that being said, again, I hope you really enjoyed this lesson and found some value in it. If you're looking for more lessons like these, please do visit the CMA Foundation's United Voices for Music Education page. And you also feel free to contact me with any questions about this lesson or anything you might be trying to think through. My email should be on the page, the CMA Foundation's page, but it's also patrick@pacollins.com. So I wish you all the best of luck in this upcoming year, and just do the best you can and show the kids that music is a fantastic thing and it's something to be enjoyed, and it's a great outlet, especially in moments like these.